Okay, I'm going to take a look here at More Aggressive Attitudes. This is the latest title from Hollandspiele Games. Or not the latest title, but one of their more recent titles. I just finished the game, played pretty quickly. It's roughly, 20 odd turns, August 9th through September 2nd, 1862. It's the operational level of that 1862 Virginia campaign against Pope and the Army of Virginia, with Lee and his Army of Northern Virginia. As you can see here on the map, things, and over here on the victory track, things did not end well for the Union. Still sort of was feeling my way through the game. It plays pretty quickly, and I didn't have too many issues with the rules. Mostly it was just getting used to the limitations of your armies in the game. As you can see, most of the units are actually stacked off of the map here. And essentially I just had really two monster stacks, and then had some of the Confederate reinforcements, as you can see here. D.H. Hill and McLaws. Their units I used to get victory points at the end of the game, which I don't know if I actually calculated that. I should have gotten another victory point for occupying Fredericksburg. So I think the Confederate victory points may actually have been 7. If the Confederates have 6 or more victory points than the U.S., they get a win, and they did. Most of those victory points, or a number of those victory points, came from combat. I kind of learned the hard lesson with the U.S. that I thought if I created a big enough stack and kept Pope with the number of commanders on the U.S. side that require a roll, because Sigel, McDowell, Porter, Park, and it says Reynolds. I think they mean, well, to be honest, I don't know who they mean. Reynolds is not actually in the game as a commander for the Union, so I'm not sure exactly who they mean there. But those, like a good portion of the available Union Corps commanders essentially will not attack unless you roll a 1 through 5 on the die, which, again, it's a 1 in 6 chance they won't attack, but still, if you have Pope stacked with them, that eliminates that restriction, so you'll always get the attack that you want. The problem is you have to roll for Pope's rating, and on a 1 through 3, he's a 1. On a 4 through 6, he's a 2. Now Lee, as you can see there, is a 3. It's this number here. Every time I tried to attack with Pope, he would roll a 1 or a 2 or something, and he'd end up with that 1, which gives Lee a 2-column shift in his favor. And the best that Pope could ever do numbers-wise, even towards the end when he had 30 troops with him, the best he could do against Lee was 2 to 1. Well, if you get a 2 shift, you're on the 1 to 2 column, which it's not. You could get a defender retreat on a 1 or 2, and then here, this is one of the result that I got on the last turn here, was this inconclusive. Each side gets 2 units fatigued. So you can end up with some not terrible, same thing here. Even on the 1 to 4 column, you can actually end up with some inconclusive results, which I actually did. I did have a couple of 1 to 4 attacks with Pope just from column shifts. So Pope kind of wrecks things for the Union, where I was thinking, if I keep a big monster stack, I can get the big numbers, and I have no chance of commanders getting out, commanders refusing to attack. The problem is that I've got a number of good Union Corps commanders there. Reno, he's a 3. Sumner's a 3. Porter's a 3. Heinzelman's a 3. So if I get the right combination of guys stacked together, then I'm not stuck with those terrible column shifts. So I think I just played a bad Union strategy of trying to do too much with Pope and a unified army, and that just allowed Lee to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, even though he was at times not really heavily outnumbered, because he always managed. I kept Longstreet and Jackson stacked together. I think if I split up my Longstreet and Jackson forces, well, I don't know. Because I ended up getting the depot from Aquay Landing, and then I destroyed the depot at Manassas Junction, and that gives the Confederates 2 more victory points. I don't know if I tried to split up the Union forces more to cover those depots. I just feel like Lee and Longstreet, who's the other 3. Jackson's only a 2 on the attack. He's actually better on the defense, where he's a 3. I feel like I still could have pushed the Union pretty heavily, even with a split Confederate force. It's not until August 24th and 25th, so well into the turn track here, that you get into serious numbers differences, where the Union really can kind of can have a little more freedom to operate once Porter and Heinzelman come in, and then Sumner and Franklin come in. Sumner and Franklin, they'll come in very late, and so you've only got about 4 turns to do anything with them before it's too late. So what I tried to do with Pope here at the end was when he had that 2-to-1 advantage on Lee, was to try and take back Manassas Junction and at least deny the Confederates that victory point, but it didn't work out that way. I ended up used some of the special, whatever they are, special event chits. Yeah. For the Confederates, I didn't really have an opportunity to use most of them, which involved, removing fatigue and recover from disruption, because they never really got fatigued or disrupted. So, and actually nobody got fatigued until the last turn of the game. So the fatiguing didn't happen hardly at all. So I'm sort of still learning my way through in terms of the strategy. And I don't remember if in the designer notes. If he talked about strategy at all, he does talk about the cost to stack. It's a +1 movement point to stack with units, to stack with other units, even if they're part of the same core structure. So that becomes a very tricky part of the game. You never want, if you're trying to move a consolidated or coordinated force, you never want to have, and everybody has to roll to see what they can move. So you might have one stack that can move 4, but then another stack of guys that you want to stack with that stack. Everybody has to move independently. You can't move stacks. But you want to stack people, say, at the end of movement. Well, if one unit has a movement of 4 and the other has a movement of 2, you can't run the movement of 4 guy out too far ahead, because the guy that has a movement of 2 that you want to stack with him at the end of the turn, he needs to have an extra movement point on hand just to be able to stack with that unit that he's with. So it leads to this kind of creep, where units will end up just moving, 1 hex at a time, so they can all stack with each other to allow the slowest guys to keep up. So that was something you definitely had to get used to. And I think everybody can move 1. So if you do have a giant stack, you can kind of just slide them along 1 space. Because in the movement rules, it said units may exceed their movement allowance if they move only 1 hex in that movement phase, meaning that if you roll a 2 movement point result for a particular unit, but you want to move across a river or something and stack on another unit, that would cost you 3, but you could do that as long as that's the only hex you move. So everybody can kind of always move 1 hex, but that's just contributes to this sort of creep across the map, because movement rules are on a 1 through 4 you only get 2 movement points. On a 5 through 7 you get 3, and an 8+ you get 4. So the only way you can ever get that 8+ is if you're not starting, ending, or moving adjacent to enemy units during your move, where you get a +2 to your movement die roll. So units only occasionally got 3 movement points and almost never got 4 movement points. So it makes it hard to move anything more than 1 hex if you want to have a big stack of units. So just one of those things you have to kind of learn as you're going. And so it definitely, nobody's racing across the map in this, that's for sure. So that was, in general, I enjoyed it. I'd kind of like to play it again. It plays pretty quick, just to see if I can do something different and or better with the Union. Maybe try and avoid the monster stack situation that I ended up in, where Lee and Pope just kind of beat the crap out of each other, and Lee essentially just drove Pope all the way from Aquia Landing all the way up to here, almost to Alexandria. They didn't quite make it that far. So I'd be curious to try some different strategies. Component-wise, my only complaint about the game, the map's very handsome and everything, but the turntable up here, so these turn spaces don't really, you can see I had the game turn, this doesn't really coordinate very well with the space. You know, the turn thing is way bigger than the spaces, and then for reinforcements, you know, you're supposed to put the reinforcements along the turn track of when they're supposed to come in. And again, you know, that's hard to tell too. It's almost like you would have to stack those guys, you know, on end. These big thick laser cut counters from Hollandspiele can do that, but it seems like, you know, why should they do that? So, you know, well, I think the graphics and everything are very period appropriate and pretty cool. I would have preferred, you know, more appropriate square turn tracks, but as you can see, had they made them square, it wouldn't have really fit on there very well, or they would have had to make this larger, you know, to put 2 rows of squares or something on there, or, you know, not be able to get the reinforcements. They, in theory, I guess, could have put the reinforcement names in the squares or whatever, to make the counters and the turn marker fit in the turn spaces, but that's just sort of a minor graphical quibble. Otherwise, I think everything else about the game was great. The rulebook was great. The two player aids, very clear. Nice to have all the main tables there. Yeah, the only drawback is the CRT and casualty table and TEC are all on the back of the rules, which I'm not usually a big fan of that. I like to have my rules separate from my main charts, but you know, this is only 8 pages of rules, so it's not exactly cumbersome to deal with that. But anyway, an enjoyable experience from Hollandspiele. I look forward to more Civil War titles that are coming soon. Another one that's going to be kind of in this system on the Red River campaign, and then one that Tom Russell himself is doing on the Battle of Seven Pines, which should be coming out hopefully pretty soon. Anyway, more aggressive attitudes, I would recommend giving it a try.